Hello, hello. Can you hear me? Is anyone there? Hello, Gabriel. Nice to see you here. So, I assuming with this hi that I'm audible, so we're gonna start. Okay, welcome everybody. Welcome back here in another streaming session in the .NET Barcelona community. I'm Xavier Abelaira Social, and today we are going to talk about .NET Aspire. And I know that this topic creates a lot of expectation, so I will humbly try to share this introduction with you, and I hope you will find it useful. There we go, let's go in. So let's first understand, for those who haven't worked yet with it, or you even don't know what is it, let's first talk about what is .NET Aspire. We will first explain briefly what is it, what problem tries to solve, and its main features. So what is Aspire? Let's try to see first, very summarized, what the Microsoft documentation says about it. It provides tools, templates, and packages to help you build observable, production-ready apps. Provides features for running and connecting multi-project applications, container resources, and other dependencies for local development environments. Even though these two sentences describe pretty well what it is, let's bring it down to a more grounded level. Let's try to explain it from a more pragmatical and instructional perspective. It helps orchestrating both infrastructure and services, that's all. Maybe you have 2-3 services, a web, one or more databases, a message broker. Everything can be defined and orchestrated from here and glued together. It allows to handle both managed and containerized resources. And it is because it's not only restricted to containerized resources. So given that, you can run services not only in .NET, also in other technologies such as Node, any NPM-based project, Python, and any other resource, both with official Aspire hosting support or by creating your own resource pointing to an existing container. You can also add managed infrastructure requirements such as Azure Cosmos, Key Vault, as it says, in fact. And it is true that .NET Aspire is still taking its first steps. It was presented during the 2023 .NET Conf a year and a half ago. However, you can find a lot of different integrations nowadays, even beyond the most frequently used. And here comes something really interesting. Not only Microsoft is bringing up the project, at the same time, both third-party vendors such as Amazon are adding official support for this. Even the community is creating amazing integrations such as native support for Java or Go apps, among others. So that looks very promising. So as you can see, the entire ecosystem is in full swing, and the community is very excited about what .NET Aspire provides and the new features that each new major or minor release brings. More things. It provides default observability and resilience implementations, centralized in a part of the project called service defaults, something mandatory for real production-ready apps nowadays. And after all, this is the main objective, as per today, of Aspire, helping orchestrating locally your system. Whether you have a basic system with a client-server app and a database, or a complex microservice architecture including multiple databases, message brokers, services, different technologies, or whatever your requirements might be. We will see later that this is not the only goal, but there is room to grow for Aspire in multiple directions, especially when it refers to deployment. And having reached this point, you might be thinking if we don't have something similar, and the answer is partially. Aspire is trying to cover one space that hasn't been fully covered, mainly in how you define your services, how you orchestrate them, how to connect them properly and run locally, helping debugging, analyzing how it works, allowing us to even anticipate certain problems that wouldn't be possible with classical strategies. Docker Compose is the most similar tool since it helps orchestrating several containers locally. But we all know that if you can do it with the language that you love in an easier manner, like with C# instead of YAML, reducing the complexities of the networking configuration, service discoverability, telemetry collection, this helps a lot. In fact, I can share something. Recently, I had to work again with a project orchestrated with Docker Compose. And we are all going to need it anyway, despite Aspire's existence. We are not going to remove it from our stack. The point is that after having played and enjoyed the sweetness of Aspire, it gets a bit tedious. It's a bit tough to be back on this. Moreover, Aspire does this and more, since you are not only restricted to use containerized resource, and you can mix them using projects running without them, and manage infrastructure resources as well. Gives a lot of flexibility and power at the same time. Dapper is another tool that covers partially the space of Aspire, but mainly while defining the services, since Dapper provides plugins to abstract the code from the infrastructure. Moreover, Dapper has official integration support with Aspire, so chaff to bits. Let's now talk about the different features that are provided with Aspire to achieve all of this. Provides a fantastic dashboard, made with Blazor by the way, where we can check everything, our resources, telemetry, metrics, logs, everything. As we are going to see in the incoming slides, it provides both hosting and client integrations with the full configurations already defined. We have shared this before. It's possible to orchestrate not only .NET apps, but NPM, Python, Java apps as well, and so on and so forth. And a great possibility is that we are allowed to configure different type of resources. So imagine that you have an Azure Cosmos DB, a Key Vault, but then a couple of different DBs that can be containerized, and a few services that you want to run without Docker. We can do all of these from a single place. And actually, we are not going to touch this part today because that is where Aspire is changing the most and where it's not fully clear yet the vision that it's going to take. Since a couple of months ago, you were officially allowed to deploy it to Azure Container Apps, and at the same time to Kubernetes by using a community tool called Aspirate. But since the Aspire version 9.2, they have started delivering something that they called exporters. It was a few months ago, in fact, or a couple of months ago, where they are settling the base for how it will be deployed in the future. In the end, from this part, it's important to understand that Aspire is allowed initially to map this orchestration within a file called manifest.json. And then the different tools can just map this exported file to its own requirements, like Docker Compose, Kubernetes, and of course, Azure. Okay. Now, before the demo, that I think is what you are expecting, let's try to check first how these integrations look like in a few basic samples extracted from the official documentation. So how I configure a service? Very easy. I was not lying you when I'm saying that you will use the same patterns that you have been used to work with other .NET applications, such as ASP.NET Core, MAUI applications, anything, Blazor. You will find on a specific builder. You will find that you will create a specific distributed application builder, and once we have instantiated, we will be able to construct using Fluent syntax, adding some services, the ones that we want. We have a couple of pieces, a couple of very important pieces here. We have the service defaults that are adding these default implementations like resiliency and telemetry. This specific package is referenced and integrated in each of the services that we want to orchestrate later on. And once we have this and we have referenced these projects from the app host, we are allowed to do this. It's very important to remark that there's a code generator behind the scenes that is silently preparing everything for us. So that's why we can reference this in a very easy manner. So we can reference the catalog service in that case, in that sample. We can also reference the basket service, and we're giving a specific name for each of them. This is the name that the orchestrator uses for doing magic behind the scene, let's say. Lately, we have this front end that we are also adding to the same builder, and we are adding some reference to the to this UI. So with that, we can also have some. There's a feature called named resources where we can only inject that specific name, and then we can also only name this resource by its name instead of just pointing to a specific local host with a port and so on and so forth. So it's easing a lot the orchestration of our services. How we configure a database. That's something really interesting, because in these infrastructure requirements, both of you have orchestrated resource, a managed resource or a containerized resource. You will have two different parts. You will have the hosting part and you will have the client part. Okay, so in that case, we are going to show briefly how to integrate an SQL database, SQL Server database. And it's important to remark that in that specific example, you can see that we are using Aspire hosting SQL Server. First of all the packages that will be integrated in the app host project contains that name of hosting. So that's something that it's like a tip to understand if the project is for the hosting side or the client side. But at the same time, for instance, certain resources like SQL Server, in fact, you will find that you also have a specific dedicated hosting package for Azure. So in that case, if you install the Aspire hosting azure.sql, I'm playing by ear, so sorry if I'm not saying the exact names, but it's something similar, then you are creating a specific managed resource without a subscription. Sorry, okay. If not, if you use the one that we are showing here, means that you're creating a container in your local Docker. Okay. So once you have this is the way to integrate it. So very simple, using fluent syntax again, as we have done with the services. We add the SQL Server, we provide a name that it will be used for the orchestrator in that case. And that's something interesting. We are saying here a lifetime. We are specifying a lifetime. This means that in that case, .NET Aspire is allowing us to have specific containers always running. It means that, for instance, I don't want to stop a specific container each time that I'm stopping the project. So in that case, I can specify that certain resources like databases, a message broker, a cache, or whatever we want to keep it running even though we stop the solution. Okay, so that's really interesting and really useful, really handy. Then we are adding here the database. So we add the database, we give a specific name, database, and then we are adding this reference to that project that ideally will use the SQL Server under the hood. Then the last method that we're invoking fluently here is wait for. This means that we can force that specific project to wait until a specific resource that is a reference is up and running. So meaning that we can orchestrate the specific hierarchy that we want for such services and infrastructure and everything to be running in sequence. Okay. And this is the other part. This is the part that will be integrated in this example project in that specific brief sample. So you will use the Aspire Microsoft Data SQL client, and only by using a specific name, by a specific line, we will directly configure the connection string and the defaults that are coming with that specific client integration. That is something interesting here. You can see that the connection name that we have here and the one that we have when we have created the database are matching. And in that case, is because this is part of the opinionated way of Aspire. Once you have this defined, and we inject as a reference in another project, the project Aspire, in fact, is expecting to have a specific connection string, in that case called database. Okay. So it's part of the magic. It do this for you, and you will expect that you will have something like this in your environment variables. It's important at the same time to remember how it works behind the scene ASP.NET Core in regards to the settings. So there's a specific hierarchy. You have your app settings, and you have your secrets, and at the same time on the top of that you have your environment variables. And this is what Aspire is going to use for configuring everything for you. Okay. Another interesting thing before moving to the next slide, this created a bit of confusion since .NET Aspire 9.2 something has been added, because in fact this specific method, everyone, including me, we were expecting that this was of creating the database, in fact, and it is not like that. So it's not creating it. It's just a kind of configuration. So since .NET Aspire 9.2, they are adding a specific extraction method for that, where you're allowed to pass an script, an SQL script, or directly like an interpolated string there, where you can create the database or do another thing if you want. But at the same time, if you use some SQL migrations with Entity Framework Core or something like that, you can handle in a different way. In fact, in the example that you are going to see later on, I am not using anything from Aspire 9.2 in that sense. How to configure a message broker? Very similar, very simple. I'm giving as an example here RabbitMQ because it's one of the most popular ones, and you can see that you add a package to the hosting, exactly the same experience than with SQL Server, and then you only have to add to the builder a specific RabbitMQ instance with a specific name. That's all. And exactly the same, we are going in an opinionated way. We are going to expect that there will be a connection string called messaging, because it is what Aspire is doing automatically for us. It's just configuring it in a specific part of this section with this specific name in the section of the connection strings. Advantage. So this is summarize what we can have when we work with Aspire. Simplified local environment setup, developer experience, a very good developer experience based on C# and the same patterns that the rest of .NET apps has. And the possibility to handle both managed and containerized resources. That's the perfect feature, a perfect advantage from the framework. And now, let's see, which is our use case today. Our demo will be based on that specific project. We will see a management system for a hospital, okay? So in that case, we will have a couple of APIs, a couple of basic APIs, one for doctors, the doctors of that hospital, and another one for the patients, because we have a database with all the patients that are within that specific system, healthcare system. Something important is that each of them will have its own SQL database, okay? Then, since we are going to have a specific manager UI, and we have different microservices, following best practices in microservices architecture, we will have a specific backend for frontend, okay? It will be in charge of interconnecting the different requirements for our manager UI. That is the one that you're seeing now. But we have more. We will have an appointments API, because, of course, there will be people ill that will go to the hospital. They will say, hey, I need a doctor. I need to have a check because I'm not feeling good. And we will have an appointment API for that. But in that case, we will have a different infrastructure requirement. Instead of having an SQL server, we will have a MongoDB instance. Why not? Because it's part of the magic of microservices architecture. We can have different infrastructure requirements. The one that fits better for use case or requirements, that's fantastic. And we will have an interesting sample here with a lot of different technologies involved at the same time. Since we are going to have something very similar in terms of structure with a UI pointing to these appointments API, we will have as well an appointments panel BFF, okay, a backend for frontend. Why? Because we will have an appointments panel, the one that you see in every hospital or healthcare place where you go and you're waiting for your appointment, and the box to know how you had yourself, okay? So in that case, we will have this appointments panel BFF. But that's something interesting on top of that. While we will be using Blazor for that particular UI, we will be using Angular for that one. Again, because we can, and Aspire is allowing us to do that smoothly, so why not to use it? Because we have a very big company, each team is handling the requirements in different technologies with no why, but why not? But we are not happy enough with that, so we are going to use event-driven architecture within the system with a message broker, a RabbitMQ working for our system, especially for the appointment. So when we are going to create an appointment or modify it, we need to have this data properly propagated and handling different things in different parts of the system. So we are going to create the request for that specific registration. We are going to register in our MongoDB instance. We are going to propagate this information back to our UIs, especially to this one using SignalR. So we have a lot of different things here working together with different technologies at the same time, and everything will be glued as we expect. Last but not least, something really used out there, a Redis cache that will be only in our purpose in that case for a specific call, but interesting enough to play with it and see how the Redis cache is integrated at the same time with our system. Okay, so this is what you all are expecting. Demo time. Okay, so yeah, here we have the project where we are going to work, or we are going to see today. Let me collapse everything. There is this project is composed by 3 different parts, or at least is how I'm organizing it. So you have the orchestration side, then the front-end side where we have our backend for frontends, our shared packages, and at the same time the client packages. And then we have our backend side where in our backend we have only our API services, the one for doctors, another one for patients, and another one for, I said appointments, doctors, and patients. Sorry, I forgot what I have mentioned. Bad memory. Okay, let's start from the interesting side, from the orchestration side. We have two different sides with different parts, as we have commented before. We have the service defaults. This is going to expose some basic configurations that are very important for any kind of service nowadays, as we have been sharing before. It will configure some basic for the OpenTelemetry, health checks. In fact, health checks, it will be exposing the alive and the one I don't remember now, the health and the alive. Yeah, sorry. You can see everything here navigating. It's also configuring some defaults for the OpenTelemetry, very basic stuff in any case. You can configure that, so you can extend as much as you want. So this is like a default implementation. When you're creating the template, it's creating for you, it's giving some hints at the same time. And the only thing in fact that we have changed here is that we are also integrating gRPC client instrumentation. In fact, it's something that from the original template is explaining to us, explaining how to do it. It's only requiring a specific package integration, that it is this one, the gRPC net client, and uncomment this line to have this client instrumentation for gRPC. Because something interesting that I haven't mentioned, our backend is supporting both technologies. So each of the services that we have here, you will see that in our program CS we have our endpoints. Okay, doing some zoom, I'm reading you guys. Okay, you'll have these endpoints configured here, and at the same time we have some gRPC implementation as well. So we have exactly the same implementation both in gRPC and REST. Okay, I will do some zoom by default. It will be better for you instead of just zooming in and zooming out. Thanks for the feedback, by the way, guys. And what else? Okay, so since we are providing such possibility with gRPC, so we are also instrumenting it at the same time. Okay. What else? Having explained what the service default is, let's go to the most magical part of the system. So the app host. This is where all the magic comes. Look at that. Again, I am not lying you when I'm saying that you use exactly the same patterns that you are used to work with all our .NET applications. So you can see that we have the builder here. It's creating a distributed application builder. It's giving us a distributed application builder. And when we're adding some specific services, what Aspire is doing behind the scenes for us is also configuring them easily for us. So if we go to our secrets for that specific app host, we will see that we have everything configured here, like the password for the SQL, for the MongoDB, for everything. So every container that we have as well this. okay? And you can use this at the same time for our own benefit. So for instance, since our APIs are using a specific authentication mechanism, so we're using API keys for that, I'm taking advantage of that and I'm configuring these keys here. Why? Because I have to pass down these specific values both for the client applications that are consuming my backend, and at the same time, for sure, for the backend to have it configured properly, part of the orchestration. So I'm using that to extract all these configurations, all those APIs keys here, okay? What else? As I commented before, we have a cache system here. So we are giving that specific name, and we are also having a specific image that is a UI for checking what we have in that particular cache instance. Then we have our SQL server, where you can see that we are just giving a name for the server, and we specify something that we haven't seen before, is that I'm specifying the port here. Why? Because normally at the end you not only want to have the container up and running, maybe you want to also check the data from the IDE, or maybe from another management tool system, like, I don't know, if it's Postgres pgadmin, if it's SQL Server with SQL Management Studio, or whatever, okay? So in that case, you don't want to have a specific different port each time that the container is stopped and then running again. So you can specify a port here, and then it's easy in your life, okay? Then I have explained that the container lifetime persistent means that even though I'm stopping the project, the app host project, it will be kept running, because you want to have a faster run up of your project instead of waiting for all the different resources. And these specific ones related to infrastructure, maybe you want to have it always up and running. And the last thing that we can see here is with data volume. This means that we are creating a volume in Docker that it will keep all the information for us. So it doesn't matter if I switch up the computer, if tomorrow I have to work again, I will have the same data again. So very handy method, very handy configuration. Look at this. Exactly the same for MongoDB, so nothing special to be remarkable here. Same syntax, so it's very, very easy, very comprehensive way, very deterministic way to understand what do you need to do when you have to configure, or when you need to configure specific infrastructure requirements, even though there are very different technologies. RabbitMQ, very similar, but small nuances that are differentiating from the other two. For instance, I don't need to specify a specific port, so that's something that I am handling from the management plugin that I have here. Of course, for the management plugin, maybe yes, maybe I want the same port, because why not? I want to save the link to that specific URL, and I don't want to edit any time that I'm running up. Again, same time, the same. I'm specifying that the container will be persistent and it will have a data volume. Okay. Once we have our infrastructure, it's time to create, as I have explained before, create our databases. We have one for the identity system. It is something that it is integrated, even though during the presentation we are not going to use it. But anyway, technically speaking, it's there and it's working, so you can register, you can log in, and so on and so forth. We have a couple of databases within our SQL server, one for patients, another one for doctors, and same way of doing it with the MongoDB instance for the appointments. Okay, then it's the moment, and it's really interesting. Look at that. In 25 lines, we have already defined all of our infrastructure, and even more, because we have some lines here for things that are not intrinsically part of the infrastructure. Now it's time to define our services and the dependencies. So look at that. We have our patients API here, where again trying to recap a bit what we have explained before. If we go to any of those services, we will see that we are integrating the orchestration package, the service default package. Each of them is doing exactly the same, and then of course we are referencing them here. Okay, we have the appointments one, the patients one, and the rest are exactly the same. Okay, so what we added here, we give a unique name, patient web API in that case, and this is like the most basic way to start configuring things within your API. So in that case, we can say just with environment, specify the name of environment variable that we want here, and pass down the value. So in that case, of course, if we go here to our patients API and we see our app settings, you can see that something that I really like to do it here is to specify at least the name of the value, okay? Because you know that it's going to be injected from the orchestrator part. But anyway, it's an interesting way to see what specific settings do you need, having a look to the app settings file. Here I have a connection string from another database because I want to just run it locally. Maybe I want to test it in an isolated way, but in any case this will be overridden, okay? And in fact, if we have a look on others, I think that, I don't know if all of them, no, it's having as well. And the appointments one, let me check. We have it here. Yeah, in the appointments one, I have nothing, even exactly the same for RabbitMQ. So it's a way of saying or explain that this is in fact something that you can have it. In fact, something really interesting, especially if you're working with an existing project, because it's very easy to orchestrate and configure everything from scratch when you know that you are going to configure it with Aspire. But what about when you have a big project already running and you have to configure it? Something that you can do is just use more or less the same structure that you're having, sorry. Specify the different values that you need for running in an isolated way, but then override everything from the orchestrated side. Okay, back again in our orchestration side. So we are defining that specific environment variable that will be injected in our service. Then we have a reference here to our database, and this we have seen this in our slides. So it means that we have called our database, in that case PatientsDB. So if we go here, back again in the same file, if we go here, we have exactly this name here, and we have exactly this name here when we are just configuring everything. Okay, let's back again to the program CS. Sorry, I have closed by mistake. Okay, so we are adding this reference, and we are saying that we want to wait for our database to be up and running before running this service. Something really interesting, these two services that you have here are running with a Docker, so are just simple projects. This has support for Docker. In any case, I'm running in an isolated way as well, without a container, but you're allowed to do anything. So you can also configure your own images here, your own integrations, if they point to a specific existing Docker. We haven't integrated here, so it's not something that we are going to cover today, but you can do it, and it's quite straightforward. Regarding the appointments web API, that is our backend for frontend, that at the same time, since it's Blazor server-side rendering with interactive WebAssembly, in that case it's starting up the server, and at the same time the server, of course, is providing the client application. So the same, we are just providing the API key. This is for the appointments panel, sorry, so the big one is this one. We are adding a reference to the appointment database, another reference to RabbitMQ. If we go here, as we have seen before, but let's match it again. We have, this is the doctors, sorry, appointments is here, okay. So we have one connection string for appointmentsDB and another one for RabbitMQ. It's very opinionated, it's true, but at the same time, it's something that I strongly recommend to each of you, because it's the standard way to work with app settings, and it doesn't matter if you change your project thousands of times. If it's done like this, you will easily understand where the settings are and where are your connection strings. Okay, this is very aside of Aspire recommendation. Okay, then we have the other backend for frontend, the big one, the one that it is for our manager. So in that case, look at that. Of course, the configuration is a bit more extended. So I'm adding references. And in fact, let me show you something here. You have here another diagram different than the one that we have seen during the slides. It's different because it's done in a different technology, but the diagram is the same, so I'm doing something different. Look at that. We can check if we have everything here in the code that it's matching that specific diagram. So you can see that we have two different APIs, the doctor's one and the patient one. In that case, doctor and patients are injected just by a configuration, a URL configuration that I'm going to explain now how it works. Are the two last lines in that case. We have a Redis instance here. Yes, we have the reference here with reference method. We also have a reference to the RabbitMQ. We have it here. And it is not part of this diagram because functionally, as I have said before, we are not using it, but technically speaking it's done. So we are also having this reference to identity, to the identity database. So it's another instance in the SQL server. And then I'm also saying that, hey, I want to wait for the three of them to be up and running before running that one. Let's concentrate our efforts in these two lines. As I have said before, there are different ways to inject configuration settings to our services. In that case, there's a way of using named resources. So I only have to do exactly the same with reference and inject that reference, the API, appointments API or doctor's API or whatever you may need, and that's all. But it is true that for certain reason, HTTP client is working perfectly fine, no problem, but the gRPC client is failing. So it's not collecting that specific variable with the same magic that the rest of HTTP clients. So that's why I'm using this basic way of doing it, where I'm just saying this is the environment variable that I want to override, and I'm just grabbing the patient's API from here, and Aspire is providing me this magnificent method that just by saying with the specific protocol that do I want, it will give me real time the URL that that Aspire is providing to that specific service. So different ways to do it, depending on your requirement. You can do one or another, so it's up to you. All of them works pretty fine. More things. We have the panel server here. So because I was not saying correct before. This is not the backend for frontend for the appointments API. This is the appointments API, and this is the appointments panel backend for frontend. Okay. In that case, something very similar, injecting environment variables with this format, with environment method, a reference to the RabbitMQ. We are waiting for RabbitMQ instance to be up and running, and also we are waiting for the API to be up and running before running this backend for frontend. Something interesting here. We are executing here an Angular application. This configuration is valid for any NPM based application, so it doesn't matter if it's a Vue application, React application, whatever, so you will be able to run it as well. Okay, so we are using a specific package here, is this one, Aspire hosting Node.js. There are other packages for Python. I think that we have official support for Python and Node.js, and it's the community the one that it is giving support to technologies such as Java, Go, and I don't know if we have other technologies out there, but there are a lot of different community packages that even though, as I have said before, even though .NET Aspire is still taking its first steps, so you have it anyway. You have a lot of different packages out there giving you a lot of possibilities. Okay, so as with the other resources, I give a unique name here. I'm pointing to the relative path where this specific package JSON is. I have here a project that is so I'm allowed here to see the code from the client side, the Angular client side. And there's something interesting here. Sorry, I have had better days. I'm a bit I'm not perfect today. Okay, so we have here something very interesting. So as you can see, we are also specifying here that we want to have a specific endpoint available, because otherwise we are not going to be able to reach that specific client. So in that case, we are using by default HTTP, as we can see here, to connect with such NPM client, let's say, or NPM application, client application. What is that last part? So as most of you will know, if you are familiar working with client with server, with the client in the different domain that the server, so you will have by default the course enabled, and in that case we are enabled for that specific UI in a very fancy way. So considering that we have a builder here, we are just saying, okay, so I have my client here already defined, I have my backend for frontend here, how can I configure now in a flexible way? So by using exactly the same that we have done here, even though we are configuring the server in 2 different steps. So now that we have here the client, considering also the reference to the server and so on and so forth, here we can say, okay, so now we have our client, let's invoking the same endpoint, the same method that we have in other scenarios. Let's try to grab the HTTP URL that it has been assigned to such resource and inject directly as an environment variable here. And if we go here to the appointments panel that we have in our UI side, we have it here, front-end, appointments panel server, okay, we have it here. We can see that we have this appointments panel client URL here, empty as other settings, they will be injected. And if we go here, we can see that we have the add course configured. We are extracting this URL from the configuration, and then we are just configuring the policy as I have explained now, and mapping during the middleware phase. Okay, so we have everything already explained. Let's see how it works. So let's try to run it and see if how this works and how this magic is helping us during our development phase. While this is running, let's see that, let me show you here that we have our Docker instance here. Of course, I have tested it before, so we have the different images already up and running, the one for RabbitMQ, the server for the MongoDB, the one for SQL. Okay, so I think I have, yeah, the dashboard is here. So if you have starting this from a cold start, because again it's the first time that you're running, you will see in an easier manner how this is just running in a sequential way. Okay, so it will, as we have explained before, so and as we have seen in the configuration, so first the DBs will be starting up our cache, so mainly our infrastructure requirements, then the services, then the backend for frontends, and then the UI. So it's a very nice choreography, let's say. As you can see, we have everything here. So it's a very nice implementation, that one that we have related to the dashboard of Aspire. So we have the cache here, we have the inside here that we can just connect if we want. Okay, in fact you can see here that we have some entries here. Sorry, not the entries, I haven't opened. We have the server. In fact, we have our MongoDB instance here, that I have my Mongo compounds here, so I can just click on connect and I can see that I have my database here with a lot of appointments. Okay, this is a bit small, I can zoom it a bit just to allow you to see it briefly. And what else? Let me zoom it here as well. It will be easy for you to see everything. What else? So I can see also as well our SQL instances here. So we have the hospital manager here, databases. For instance, we can just do a quick query here to the doctors, view data. Yeah, it's a bit small again, but you can see it. So we have our data here in our SQL instance for doctors. Seems that everything is working pretty fine. Let's see what else we can do with that. Look at that, something really interesting from .NET Aspire 9.1. They are collapsing the resources within their specific parent, let's say. So for instance, if you have different databases that belongs to the same SQL server, so they are collapsed within the same one. They are also giving specific colors that helps you a bit with the traces, I think, and at the same time with the graph that I'm going to open in a few seconds, let's say, or minutes. You can also have brief information about the port that is using, the kind of application that you're running here. So we can see here that it is a Docker image in that case, Docker image as well, Docker, everything is Docker. This is an npm application. These are just simple projects. I think that also, considering the icon that you have here, you can also have an information about what do you have here. And let's try to see it. Sorry, let me show you first the graph. This is a very amazing feature that it has been added from .NET Aspire 9.2. So we have the same thing that we are seeing here in a table views, but in a graph view. So we have our databases, we can move it them, our cache. The cache inside is depending on the cache. The only thing that I'm missing is that you can't extend a bit these arrows, so then you have a bit of mix here, everything together in the middle. But anyway, it's quite nice, and you can also understand in a graphical way how they are interacting between them. Okay. More things. For instance, let's see how can we connect with our RabbitMQ. This is something that I have to change to. Okay. Let me log out first because I will explain something really interesting. If you go here, there are different ways to grab the different password or credentials that you will require for your resources. Several ways. One of them I have already mentioned. If you just check and see the resources, the secrets here from the app host. Another one is from the containers view of Visual Studio. You will be able to see all the containers that you're running locally. Okay. So for instance, we have here the RabbitMQ, and you can see as well that we have the environment variables here, so we can just check that we have the password here, the username, and so on and so forth. But the nicest way to do it, and the one that I recommend you to do it, I don't recommend it anyway, you can use the one that you prefer, but you can do it from here. So because you have an amazing details view for each resource. So for instance, if we go here to the RabbitMQ, and we see view details, I will zoom out a bit first because I think it was like I thought it was like a direct button here instead of just having it collapse with the three dots. Anyway, it's here. You can go here, view details, and here you have a lot of different details for that specific resource. Let's say a lot of different things. In your use case, we can see here from the environment variables, we can also check the password here, and the user that I already know that it is guest, so I don't want to copy it. Guest, I'm copying the password, and then we can log in. Same for the SQL database if we need to connect, same for MongoDB, everything. Okay, so that's a very handy way or handy view for us as developers. Okay, let's start then seeing how it works from a functional perspective. So let's try to open our web UI. Okay, so we have our Blazor web UI here, server-side rendering. I can talk about Blazor in another session if you want. But if we go here, we can see that we have our patients grid here. Another one for doctors. And something really interesting is that from the dashboard, since I have OpenTelemetry already configured, I can go here and I can see everything. Okay, I can see everything. I can also filter by specific resources if I want. So for instance, I can go here to the patients grid and I can see all the orchestration related to calls, requests, behind the scenes for me. I can see here that I'm using gRPC. You can see that it is collected here, so we have this client integration. This is how we can see that here, If we switch and we put the HTTP client, so it will be exactly the same, but even instead of gRPC, it will be a get call instead. And we can do it for any of them, so it's quite interesting. Something that I don't like is the fact is, if I go here to doctors again, this is caching in the first time our information. Okay, so if I go here, if I go here, yeah, this is the last doctor's grid request, and yeah, I'm not seeing anything related to the cache, and it is because in my use case in particular, if we go here to the server side, we go to the program, I'm using, let me check it, endpoints are here. Okay, I'm using hybrid cache. So for that particular integration, I don't know why, because behind the scenes hybrid cache is using distributed cache as well. Distributed cache is the one that I am orchestrating here properly, because if we go here to the server, we can see that I have the proper Stack Exchange Redis distributed caching. So given that on paper I should be seeing something here, but I am not seeing, and it's because of this hybrid cache. Okay, anyway, maybe something that with a bit more of research, maybe I can somehow do a workaround or fix it or improve it, or maybe something is missing. But because of the hybrid cache, at this time with this implementation is not grabbing this information in the telemetry. Okay, it's working, it's perfectly working, but the telemetry is not showing me anything in particular. If we load this on paper, oh, no, I'm not seeing it here. Should be cached, I don't know. Let me open again, otherwise. Resources, cache inside. It's weird. Okay, but I don't know why. We have the doctor's grid. This is the information that we have cached here. So this information is cached. So that's why we don't require for a certain period of time to request again or to hit again our server. Okay. More things. Let's go here, and now we are going to put it in parallel. Why? Because, oh sorry, not this way. And we first open our panel server. This is the panel that we are going to see it in our hospital, because we want to provide an amazing experience to our patients. They will be waiting here for 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, depending on the country that you're seeing it. That's part of the life today. Very sad, but true. Anyway, we have our appointments panel here. It's in our code, the code that we are going to have in our ticket. It's the state, registered, and we have no box yet to go. Okay, let me do it from the beginning. Let's go here to the registered appointments. Okay, so for instance, let's try to find for a specific patient, Emily Howard, that's correct, or Daniela Guerrero, it doesn't matter, one doctor that will be assigned to that particular patient. And this patient has fever. Check it quickly. Okay, let's submit, and automatically following, as you can see, we have been notified here that a new one has been registered. And if we go back here to our diagram, and if we follow a bit the process that it has been done, our backend for frontend has left a specific message here. Okay, we can see that we have some exchange and queues here. So our registration has been created. We can see that a message has been received here and has been consumed, of course, so we no longer have it there. And there, the appointment has been registered, created another one, another message in the broker, and it has been consumed by the backend for frontend to notify to our UI. Okay, let me now change the status of one of them. So if I click here, look at that. For the admission, it's also changing the status. So everything is working smoothly for us, everything orchestrated by Aspire. Okay, and we have defined from the beginning how we want to expose such services, how we want them to be configured. So now you can configure it or deploy it in the way that you prefer. So Aspire will allow you to deploy it, but it is not its main target, or at least as per today. Okay, even though that you can do it, again, I'm going to repeat it, it is not the first goal. So I don't recommend you in an enterprise application to follow a specific process with a manifest or with Aspirate or so on and so forth. Okay. There's something interesting that I want to show you as well. Let me stop this 1 second, because something really interesting that Aspire allows you as well. I haven't configured it by default because I don't need it, but you can do it. Imagine that we want to have more than one instance and we want to test how it behaves. If I have any resource, there is one specific method. In fact, it's auto-filling for me. With 2 is enough, I can put more. There's one specific method that allows me to add more replicas to a particular resource. Okay, so given that only by this line I'm allowed locally to run different services, different instances of the same service, sorry, and test it. So that's amazing. Let me run it. It's compiling, and we will see that in this moment it will create 2 different services for me, and you can see that we are not using any container at all in that case. So we can do it with anything if we want. And for allowing us to do so, what is creating behind the scenes for us is it's a reverse proxy for each service. So having this reverse proxy in each service, we are allowed to consume any of such replicas that I'm having here. You can see that now we no longer have an hospital manager with UI. Now we have with suffix here for each of the images, even though I'm having exactly the same URL, and everything works exactly the same. So if I go here, I can register an appointment again. I can say patient 77 and another patient with fever and cough. Well, doesn't matter. It's just a test. Okay, so everything is working as we expect, even though we have more than one particular instance running for the same resource. Okay, very straightforward, very useful. Let me try to show the last things that I can show from here, so we can see that we have a lot of we can filter by the logs, so we can see everything like events. So for instance, we can see that the request that has been done, migrations that has been applied at the beginning, everything, and we can filter as I'm saying. So we can go here to the appointments web API, and we can see that our processor has been started. Some warnings as well for the HTTP2 is not enabled. This is because I think it's because it's throwing me a warning for the gRPC implementation, but in any case it's working. I don't know why it's failing or it's throwing me that. The TLS is not enabled. Okay, anyway, I can check it later. You can have everything here, everything that you needed. Okay, so logs, traces. So you have OpenTelemetry already here. So you can also check by resource different metrics. So you can go here to the web appointments or another one. It doesn't matter. So also for instance, or in general for the one that we have with more than one replica, you can come and see different metrics like active requests. So for instance, if we go to our panel again, let me check from here. We can see that we can call it multiple times, and ideally we will see something growing here. Active request, user hosting. I don't know why I'm not seeing it. Maybe it's a bit slow, or duration. I am seeing it here. Why not here? Well, anyway, so we can see metrics from different collectors. We can also check the garbage collector here, how it's working, the garbage collector behind the scenes for us, so we can investigate a bit how the performance is for such for each service. I think from .Aspire 9.2, in fact I have here the link already open. There is something really interesting related to metrics because it's throwing some warnings. I don't know if we are going to see it here. The point is that depending on, imagine that you have a metric that it is not, you're not properly using maybe the metric, or you're not properly coding on a specific endpoint. You will see something, a certain warning here that it will say, or it will warn you about you have to implement or improve a certain implementation. I don't remember exactly how it was. I'm talking too much about that without enough information, but it is quite interesting that they are adding a lot of different useful features for us as developers, and well, so I think that with that I have explained mainly all related to what we have here today. There are more things that that I can explain related not only to Aspire, but maybe we can have different sessions for that. So now it's time to you. I'm seeing the chat here. I'm seeing that there are a lot of you guys here checking the streaming. If you have questions, please write in the chat, and I will be glad to reply you. Tick tock, tick tock. Do you have any question, guys, related to Aspire, related to any particular requirement that you may have in your future projects, in your companies, whatever? We'll wait a couple of minutes, just if anyone is a bit shy to throw a message here. Checking now here the active request. I don't know if it was a bit slow for collecting that. I don't know. It was interesting, or maybe I'm busy. Okay, Eljo, thanks for your question. What exactly happens with a persistent lifetime? Okay, let me go back here. It's an interesting question. Look at that. At the end, we are just defining this for containerized resources. Okay. What do we expect to do with that? Imagine that if we don't define this, the Docker image will be stopped, okay, and it will be spinned up again when we start the app host. So especially with such infrastructure requirements, maybe you don't want it, okay? Maybe because two different reasons that comes to my mind. One is because you want to have your data there, because you're doing some tests, you're doing anything there, and you want to have exactly the same data that you had in your previous execution. But at the same time, because you want to spin up everything as fast as possible. So why to stop and run again the container, even though it's fast, but okay, if you have to do it 10 times per hour or more, so you're consuming a lot of time, okay? So with that, then you're just saying, okay, leave it there, even though I stopped that, leave the container up and running. And this is what you're going to see now. I'm going to stop this. Everything, of course, is stopped, but if we go here, our instances are still running. The cache, RabbitMQ, manage the SQL instance, the MongoDB. Oh, sorry, the cache no, because the cache is not. Yeah, we are not saying nothing. In fact, it's a nice test with that. Since we haven't defined this here for the cache, once we are stopping, the image is stopped as well. Okay, so very good question. Thanks for bringing it. More questions? You're welcome, Eljo, and you're welcome, Gabri. Thanks. What else? Do you have more questions, guys? I hope you have enjoyed. I hope you have find it useful. We can talk a lot about Aspire. It's an amazing framework. I think it helps a lot, especially if you have a complex microservice architecture, but it helps in any kind of circumstance. If you have also, as we have said before, if you have a backend and a front end and a database, that is maybe the most simple definition, it can help a lot as well. Okay, thanks, Elio. Okay, guys, so if you don't have additional questions, maybe we're gonna stop the broadcasting now. Again, thank you very much for joining. I would like to remember all of you that we have a lot of different contact points. We have Blue Sky, we have LinkedIn, we have a Discord channel, we have our webpage, of course. Do not hesitate to join in any of these platforms. It will be nice to have all of you, not only if you are living in Barcelona, of course. All of you are more than welcome. We have another question. Can we configure how we balance the load of requests when we have multiple instances? Nice question. I don't have an answer for you for that now. I will check it, Victor. It's a very interesting question. I will check it and I will get back to you on that one in this specific chat, okay? Because it's a very interesting question. I haven't tested that. Sorry for not giving you a final answer at this moment, but I will check again. I promise. Okay, so thank you, everybody. Again, I hope you have enjoyed, and we see you in the next session if you want to join it and you have enjoyed. So thank you so much, guys. Have a nice rest of the week.